Hi, I'm Gareth Green, and in this video we're going to be having a look at the opening of a beautiful piece written by Edward Elgar, well-known British composer, and it's entitled Salut d'amour. It's all about love. It's Elgar's Opus 12, and he finished writing the piece in 1888. He was very much in love, and this was what he offered as an engagement gift. So that's the context of the piece. Not originally written as a piano piece, but written for violin, but is one of these pieces that's presented in various different forms, different arrangements, and I just thought it might just be easier to see it as a piano score. So let's have a listen to the opening of this piece, which you may know. If you do, that's great, and hopefully what we do in the next few minutes will enhance your appreciation of the piece. If it's a piece you don't know, well, here's a chance to engage with it. And so it goes on. So you get the idea. It's a beautifully romantic piece, isn't it? Well, how does Elgar go about communicating all this amour, all this love in this piece? Well, first of all, it's got a very beautiful romantic melody. Let's have a look at how he sets about this melodic writing. So this is the first phrase. Often when we're writing melodies, we might be thinking about the balance between conjunct and disjunct movement. In other words, which notes are going by step, which notes are leaping. Because if it all goes by step, it tends to get a bit tedious. If it all leaps around the landscape, it tends to get a bit disjointed. But sometimes a really good balance between the two can be really effective. And here's Elgar showing us exactly how to do that. It's interesting just to go through and analyze what's conjunct and what's disjunct, because we've got disjunct, disjunct, conjunct, 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 disjunct, repeat, repeat, disjunct. So you see how there's a kind of real balance, isn't there, between conjunct and disjunct, with some use of repeated notes as well. And what he does with the intervals that he uses, because you notice at the beginning of this melody, there's a falling six, a major six. Now, many 19th century Italian opera composers, for example, use the major six. It's a particularly telling interval, very expressive interval. If you want to express love, well, the major six can do it for you. And it's the first thing Elgar does in this tune. He has this falling major six. And then interestingly, having fallen down that huge distance, he goes back up again. So do you see how that first bar of the melody is beautifully loaded with this huge fall and then kind of straight back up again? And then having had that leap, he comes back inside the leap with conjunct movement. So you see how the first bar of the melody is a beautiful balance with the second bar, with this disjunct, reclaiming the top note, then conjunct movement, and then we're ready for the next leap. Well, the first leap was a leap downwards, but this time he decides to have a leap upwards. So you see how that even balances. We've got the downward leap, now we've got the rising leap. And then we have a repeated note. We haven't had that before. And he repeats it again, which makes it even more telling. 1, 2, 3 A's. And then right at the beginning of the phrase, we had this interval of the 6, and he reserves the biggest leap for the end of the phrase when he comes down a 7th. So it's a huge leap. Very unusual at the end of a phrase to do that, to fall down a whole 7th, but that's what he does. Then he goes on to the next phrase, which starts here, and notice what he does this time. We've got the same start. You know, when we had this start up here, we had the falling major 6, the reclaiming of it. Now, what does he do this time? He makes it a minor 6. So this B becomes a B sharp. In other words, there's just that slight alteration. We think we're going to get this again, but this time he goes, and that B sharp becomes even more telling because last time it was B natural. Oh, okay. Then what does he do? Then he has exactly the same bar again. So the second bar of this phrase is the same as the second bar of that phrase. Then he has the repeated note going on again. So we've got this idea of 3 repeated notes. But notice last time they were 3 repeated A's. This time they're 3 repeated F sharp. So whereas he had this rising 4th last time, this time we're sticking with conjunct movement, just going up a note. So last time it stretched up there, didn't it? Before plunging the 7th. This time it's not stretching as much, feels a bit more settled. But then instead of having the falling 7th, we have a rising note, and it's a chromatic rise. The F sharp goes up to F double sharp. It kind of pulls us into the next phrase, even though it's the end of this phrase. And then what does he do? Well, we start the next phrase here, and the first bar is the same as the original first bar of the melody. So that's the same. And then we have the same bar again. This bar comes again here. But then what happens? The first time, remember, we went up a 4th. The second time we just went next door. This time, biggest leap. We're going up a 6. So remember what we were saying about the expressive power of the 6 in the first bar? Well, here it comes, but this time it's a rising 6. So this repeated note this time, we've still got the 3 repeated notes at the top, but this is the highest it's been. We had 3 repeated A's, didn't we, back here. Then we had 3 repeated F sharps. Now we've got 3 repeated C sharps, the highest point. It adds to a sense of climax in the melody. And then he kind of climbs down the scale. Ta-dee-dum, ya-do-dum, and then goes up the scale. Ta-do-dum, and it just sort of finishes it off. So a much more conjunct finish, much more kind of settled. And by the time we get here, we're happily back with the tonic chord of E major. So kind of interesting to see the melodic design of this. Partly analytically, just to think, if you were writing a melody and you've got an initial idea, well, what are the ingredients that make up the initial idea? Then when you take this idea forwards, how do you use those ideas? What do you repeat? What do you change? How do you change it? And you just notice the ingredients we've looked at and how Elgar has gone about that over those opening phrases. So that's quite interesting. Okay, now of course all this is supported by harmony. So let's go back to the beginning and see what's happening in the accompaniment that sits underneath that gorgeous melody. Well, the first 2 bars are introductory bars, and they're very static, aren't they? It's just a tonic chord of E major, kind of rather beautifully spaced, I'd say. And I suppose it's kind of conveying a mood of warmth, of serenity, of utter happiness, of just utterly being in love, contentment, all being well with the world. You know, all that stuff is all there, isn't it? All that's conveyed in the first bar, but conveyed in the simplest way. Just a tonic chord as the backdrop to this. And then when this gorgeous melody comes in, he could have been tempted to come up with some wacky chord, but he says, actually, we'll just stay where we are on the tonic chord. even when he goes into the next bar, he's still with the tonic chord. But this time, in this bar, you'll notice the tonic chord moves up into first inversion, G sharp in the bass. So we're still on a tonic chord. So we've had 4 bars now of tonic chord. All we've done is shift up to the first inversion. By the time we get here, you know, the melody is in full flight and we're perhaps ready for something else to happen. So what does happen? We get this rather gorgeous use of the supertonic 7th, so chord 2-7. Oh, I mean, it just makes for a sense of longing, doesn't it? And this amour is oozing out of that 2-7, don't you think? And then we go on to the next bar and we have a 5-7. And which is rather clever because you think, well, this is the end of the first phrase, so what's the cadence? Dominant 7th? What sort of cadence finishes by going 2-7 on to 5-7? Well, of course, it's partly Elgar's way of pulling you into the next phrase, especially with that falling 7th in the melody as well, because that dominant 7th is screaming to resolve, and it does at the beginning of the next bar. So you have this intense sense of relief when you come to the first chord of the next bar of kind of back with that tonic chord again. And then he says, okay, time to go somewhere. So apart from the melodic thing that we've already talked about, this chord then becomes the dominant chord in C sharp minor. Well, that makes sense. C sharp minor is the relative minor of the home key. So that's what that is. And then we go into C sharp minor, tonic chord in the next bar. That again also makes sense. It's also interesting to look at the melody of this bar in relation to that C sharp minor tonic chord, because F sharp is dissonant. It's a sort of accented passing note, passing tone onto the E, then a lower auxiliary or a lower neighbor tone back to the harmony again. And that just intensifies the longing of the moment, you know. The longing of love is definitely there, isn't it? And then we come into the next bar and we're on the move because we're heading towards B major. So when you get to this chord, you've got a dominant 7th chord in B major, but we've got a 4-3 on the approach to that. You notice the B's in this chord. B's going to A sharp. And it just heightens the suspense a bit there and allows for a sort of sense of resolution with the repeated note in the melody, doesn't it? You sort of feel we've resolved onto this, even though it's a dominant 7th, so it too needs resolving, which is what pushes us on to the third of the repeated notes. We finally get a resolution to B major. And of course, the wonderful thing about that is that the B major chord is the tonic chord of B major, but it's also the dominant chord of E major, and he's pulling us back to E major. And then we have this wonderful F double sharp we talked about. So we get that dominant chord, and then we get this. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Because you think, well, there's the dominant 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th, but you know, kind of what's happening there, that flattened 13th, as it were, but pulling us up chromatically from the B major chord till we get pulled into the tonic chord again. Notice one thing Elgar's a real master of. He doesn't allow the music to sit down at the end of a phrase. You know how often this happens, doesn't it, in a line? You get to the end of a phrase and we just plonk down on a chord and then we start again. What Elgar frequently does is to use the last chord of a phrase to pull you into the next phrase. Classic example here, that B major chord, and then, you know, you couldn't possibly go home now, could you? You've got to resolve it. But as you resolve it, you're resolving into the first chord of the next phrase. Gorgeous. And then we're back with our E major chord. You know, he keeps going home to E major, where all is well with the world, you know, the perfect picture of love, I suppose. And then he comes into the next bar Well, all this is a kind of rerun of something we've done up there. So E major, first inversion, but then stretching that melody up to the C sharp we talked about. And we have an A major chord then. So that's a chord 4, but then a hint of another key, because then at this point he uses a 5/7 second inversion in the key of F sharp. It's F sharp minor, because the first chord of the next bar is the tonic chord of F sharp minor. And of course, it might be the tonic chord of F sharp minor, but F sharp minor is also chord 2 in the key of E. So he's had that little bit of colour and a bit more increased intensity going to F sharp minor, but he's going to use it to come back to E major. Dominant starts in the bass, our preparation for the cadence, 2 bars of dominant, chord 1 in second inversion, passing through sort of chord 2 and chord 4, even though that's all still sounding. And then we've kind of got this pull onto the dominant chord from there, haven't we? And then this is kind of rather nice hint of chord 3 there actually, and then 5/7, 5/7, absolutely longing to resolve to the tonic of E major again. And here we are with that serenity of being back in the home key. Then of course he goes on to a 4C, diminished 7th, ooh, and then the dominant chord, so lovely linking thing, and then we're going to run round some of this stuff again. And on he goes. Oh, it's just gorgeous music, isn't it? So this is all absolutely wonderful, the way Elgar manages to convey his absolutely undying love at this point in his life, and it comes to the music. What a wonderful engagement present. How about that, eh? That would be one to savour, wouldn't it? Gorgeous piece, gorgeous insight into how Elgar deals with the theme of love so directly. And we've just seen how he does that with such fantastic musical technique, but kind of emotional grasp of the whole thing as well, through the melody, through the harmony, through the use of texture, this kind of syncopated rhythm kind of going through the whole thing as well. You know, we had these little excursions into other keys, the design of this conjunct and disjunct movement, the leaps, how the leaps change, the use of repeated notes. You know, it's all there, and you see how all that combines to make this absolutely ravishing piece. So I hope that gives a little bit further understanding into the style of Elgar, into what's going on in this piece, and might just entice you to engage further with the music of this wonderful composer. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, you might like to go to our website, www.mmcourses.co.uk. When you're there, you'll be able to click on Maestros. That will tell you all about our global program for musicians. 3 levels of maestros, nothing to do with ability. They're kind of 3 different levels of engagement, if you like. So you can be a beginner at this thing, or you can have done it all your life, and you can be part of maestros. Level 1 comes with some perks and emojis and exciting things like that. And it's really a kind of support level. It's just an opportunity for those of you who've said that you would like to support us in our work, appreciating the time and the effort and the expense that goes into producing so many videos every week to go on the channel. So if you want to become a level 1 Maestro member, we'd be very grateful for your support. It's a very minimal contribution monthly just to help us to keep moving with all of that. If you want to go a bit further, well, level 2 gives you access to more, including access to our monthly live stream. So once a month we meet together, and I deliver an hour's worth of teaching. We run a live chat so you can ask questions, you can interact with each other, pass comments on what we're doing. So that's very much kind of feels a bit more kind of hands-on. And I'm trying to respond as often as I can to requests from members for topics that they would like us to cover. So if you've got particular things you'd really like to know about, Level 2 is a good place to be because you can ask away and they'll try to include that in the program. And then if you want to go a step further, level 3 also gives you additional access to discounts on courses and access to a second monthly live stream. And this one, you can submit your own compositions, your own harmony exercises, your own recordings of yourself performing, whatever it is that you would like to receive one-to-one feedback on from me. So I'll do that as part of the live stream. Again, the live chat runs, you can ask questions, we can interact with each other, other people can throw in their thoughts and ideas. And it's just a great way to study together, and lots of people telling us that they kind of exist in this slightly lonely vacuum musically, and it's maestros that enables them to engage with other people on the same journey, celebrating the same successes and maybe some of the same frustrations as well, and discovering ways forward, and enjoying the mutual support and the lovely interaction we have from people who live in other parts of the world. So maestros, a huge amount to offer there. Have a look and see if it's for you. Also on the homepage, you can see a link to courses that will take you to our many courses, all designed to empower the all-round musician. So whereas the YouTube videos are all kind of one-offs, these courses are A to Z kind of progressive courses, taking you through what you need to know about theory or harmony or orchestration or analysis, sight singing, whatever it is that you want to kind of get more skilled at. That's what the courses are there for. So have a look and see what there is there for you and enjoy.